Hey guys, my name is Amanda. This is Literary Weaponry, and today I'm here with a segment I like to call Last Three Reads. Last Three Reads is more or less my way of not doing a monthly wrap-up. I hate doing monthly wrap-ups. Like, you get to the end of the month, you've read like 10, 12 videos, and then you have to try and talk about them. And sometimes that can take like 45 minutes. And I really hate doing that. And then I hate editing it. And then no one watches it because it's so freaking long. And I don't blame anyone a bit. So what I've decided to do, and this is actually an idea I got from Hailey in Bookland. I think she does 5 books. But every time I read 3 books, I am going to sit down and talk to you about the last 3 books that I read. Pretty simple, right? That's why it's called Last Three Reads. Like, I'm not trying to be clever or anything. She does 5, I do 3. You know, in time, I might change how many I do. We'll see. This is the first time me doing this. So let's just get into it and see what happens. So the first book I'd like to talk to you about is Exit Strategy by Martha Wells. Now this is the 4th book and Martha Wells' The Murderbot Diary series. I have loved every book in this series, and Exit Strategy, still, it's great. It's fantastic. I love everything about it. Now, if you haven't heard of Murderbot, and if you haven't, don't know what rock you're under. However, Murderbot this is a space sci-fi kind of deal, and he, or they, I suppose, is a robot with some organic humanish parts made to look like a human, but their job is they're owned by a company. They get contracted out by that company to people who are exploring other planets or people who need some sort of protection, and Murderbot's job is to protect them. Now they're supposed to be controlled by the company, the corporation, but Murderbot hacked their own little brain, and the company no longer has control of them. Now that happened back in book 1. And the last one I read was book 4. Murderbot has been out doing whatever Murderbot does, getting into mischief, making some bad decisions, being really human for being mostly made of robot. And I think this was my favorite book of the series. Murderbot, and they don't have a name. It really just goes by Murderbot. Is exploring, I don't think they realize it, is exploring their humanity and making decisions and choices that a normal human would make. Things like having to choose between their own comfort or the obligation of being with friends or helping friends. Just even the concept of having friends is a foreign thing to Murderbot, and they're having to grapple with that in their brain. This idea of them being a full entity able to make their own choices and be publicly accepted by other people. And Murderbot is trying to deal with this. They're not doing a great job of it, which quite frankly makes it feel really human. Just the way they grapple with their I want to say their mental handicaps, their mental disabilities, their mental anxieties. Murderbot has problems, and though they try to hide it and they try to just make logical decisions, a lot of what Murderbot does is make emotional decisions, and they don't feel like they're supposed to be doing that, so they're trying to just grapple with that idea, figure out who they are and what they want for themselves. And it's something they're having a really hard time doing, and I think in this 4th book that really hits home for Murderbot. And it's just really interesting to watch them go on this journey with the people around them that they've become very familiar with and just confront these issues. And I thought it was a really interesting book. I think it's my favorite of the series so far. These are novellas. The first 4 are novellas. Book 5, I believe, is a full-length novel. I'm going to be picking that one up pretty soon, I think. But so far, I have loved this series. It's fantastic. Murderbot is more human than any human I've ever met, if that makes sense. But it's fantastic. I love it. Great series. If you haven't picked it up, you really should. The Next book I want to talk about is the second book in a series. This is A Dance with the Fae Prince, which is the second book in the Married to Magic series by Elise Kova. I loved the first book in this series. All right, it is fantasy romance, my favorite genre, especially new adult fantasy romance. I think this is kind of borderline new adultish. It's not quite adult, but it's a little more than YA. So I'm gonna say it's new adult, even though Goodreads probably would argue with me, and I don't care. So I loved the first book. It was fantastic. Adored it. Fantastic. I've already said fantastic. Let's say it again for the record. Fantastic. So I had high expectations going into A Dance with the Fae Prince. You know what I found when I have expectations about books is that I'm always let down, and this was no exception. So A Dance with the Fae Prince, I'm sure I put the cover up. Is absolutely gorgeous, which obviously raised my expectations even more. The romance felt really forced and kind of stale. It didn't feel genuine. I will forgive a lot of romance in my fantasy novels because, you know, it's fantasy. It doesn't have to feel real. But this just felt, I don't know. It didn't feel right. It felt, I'm going to give some minor spoilers about the book just because I'm having a hard time describing my feelings about it. So if you would want to go into this book knowing nothing, I'm going to give minor spoilers here in a second. Just be aware. Fast forward a little bit, I guess. So the male character, the male love interest in this book is, for the first half, incredibly emotionally abusive. Mentally and emotionally abusive. And I don't really dig that. It's one thing if you have, everyone has a temper sometimes. And there's no reason to think that characters won't have a temper and make mistakes. Like it's just a thing that happens. I have a temper sometimes. I say things I regret, and I can say some really mean things. And it's my fault. I'm human. Everyone makes mistakes. But I felt like in A Dance with the Fae Prince, it was more than just the male character having a temper, being upset about something and regretting their decision. It felt like a habit that he was used to being this emotionally abusive character and getting his way, and it just rubbed me the wrong way. Like, that's not okay. Even in fantasy, I want no part of that. It's not for me. And that made it, even though in the second half of the book, he became a lot more loving and understanding, that first half made me so uncomfortable with his attitude. I couldn't get past it. I couldn't understand the budding romance between him and our lead female. I didn't know where she was coming from. She was a strong, interesting, highly intelligent person. Just letting this guy treat her like shit. And I can't do that. I ended up giving this book, I think, a 3 out of 5. I'm going to continue with the series. Like, I know Elise Kova can write well. I've read her Air Awakened series. It's great. This one was not for me. Some other people might enjoy it. Not my favorite. The third book we're going to have a little chat about today is one that was kindly sent to me by the publisher. Appreciate that very much. The publisher is Atria Books. And the book is The Family Plot by Megan Collins. Now this is, obviously you just heard me talk about 2 fantasy novels, or a fantasy and a sci-fi. Obviously, I'm into fantasy. I like light sci-fi. It's kind of my jam. So what am I doing reading this? Which is a mystery, thriller, suspense, adult, yada yada yada. It sounded really good. Like, a family obsessed with crime, and then there's a murder in the family, and like drama, and a lot of interacting personalities, very separate personalities coming together and being stuck under one roof. I like that sounded really good. So I'm gonna put this down. I hate holding up books during this. So Family Plot, Megan Collins. Huzzah! Okay, so I went into this I tried to go in with open eyes, or an open mind, I suppose, because like I said, I don't read this type of book a lot. I enjoy most of what I read of the thriller, mystery, suspense genre, because I feel like I'm really picky about it. But this one sounded really good, so I was into it. I had a problem with the lead female character. Like, this seems to be a recurring theme for me. She was selfish and self-centered, and her family is going through this horrific ordeal. Like, I think it's in the description of the book, yeah. Yeah, she's going through this ordeal. Her dad has died. I mean, and this is all for the description. These are not spoilers. Her dad has died. She's come back to the family home, which is on an isolated island with a small village out away. But the family home is a mansion and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, the dad has died. She's come back for his funeral. She wasn't particularly close with him. But they go to bury her dad, and there's another body in his grave. Hence the name, The Family Plot. Anyway, so when she was 16, her twin brother Andy, her name is Dahlia, Dahlia's twin brother Andy disappeared. Guess what body is in this grave? If you said Andy, you're correct. So Andy's in this grave. His skull has been crushed in sometime in the past, probably when they were 16, which is when he disappeared. Skull crushed in. What happened? Because everyone had just assumed that he ran away, which, you know, the family's a bit, so you know, not a healthy family dynamic. So no one really felt weird that he'd run away. I don't know, apparently it's just a thing. But my problem with this is Dahlia comes back, so does her brother and sister. I think another sister. I don't know, were there 4 of them? Yeah, there were 4. So Dahlia comes back to the family home. Her mom, who is a little death obsessed, and her older brother and older sister are there. And they are all mourning in different ways and handling the discovery of Andy's body all in different ways. And Dahlia has mentally decided that her way of dealing with her brother's death, of coping with it, is the only way that anyone is supposed to be able to cope with this situation. And so she attacks, not physically, but verbally and emotionally attacks her brother, sister, and mother, because they are all grieving and dealing with the situation in different ways. And she was a very selfish character. She couldn't see outside of her own wants and needs to try and understand anything that was going on around her. She expected even the investigator who was looking into her brother's death to just take her word for everything, and expected him to be at her beck and call. And it was just really off-putting. I can deal when I don't like a main character, but she was written as if she was supposed to be a sympathetic character. I mean, obviously her brother and father just died. It feels like you're supposed to feel sympathy toward this character, and I really just hated her. Everything about her. I hated her mother, I hated her brother, I hated her sister, I hated pretty much all of it. The plot framework itself was really fascinating, but Dahlia was she's terrible. And I feel bad because this book has really good ratings. It almost has a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. A lot of the reviews I've seen from reviewers I trust are really positive. And this just wasn't for me. I didn't like Dahlia being weak and selfish and just absolutely ridiculous. I don't like characters that can't even pretend to give a crap about anybody but themselves. Like, I understand selfishness, but part of a book, I feel, should be learning. If the character starts off as selfish, the events of the story should lead them to getting away from that selfishness, not indulging in it. And that's what this felt like. This felt like an indulgence of selfishness. And she was I hated her. I hated her. The plot was great, but the characters were so bad that I couldn't enjoy the story. So, yeah, that was my first foray into last 3 reads. I hope you enjoyed it. I kind of enjoyed filming it. I love yammering about books, so hopefully someone likes listening to me yammer about them. So I am hoping to continue the series, and I hope you'll join me again soon. You know where those buttons are down below, and I will see you next time.